You told them to throw us away, the little girl said to the millionaire at the orphanage. But moments later, something terrible happens. Let me know what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of small, bare feet echoed through the white-tiled corridor of St. Vincent's Orphanage as two identical 4-year-old girls spotted the tall man in the grey suit who had just entered the main hall. Amelia and Olivia stopped abruptly, their wide brown eyes fixed on the imposing figure carrying a box of children's shoes for donation. Amelia screamed, "Daddy Theo," dropping the rag doll she was holding and running towards the stranger. Olivia exclaimed that he had come back, following her twin sister with her little arms outstretched. Theodore Vance, at 52, owner of the largest shoe factory in Northwood, felt his body stiffen as the two children clung to his legs, his hands, always precise in handling contracts and business documents, trembled slightly as he tried to break free from the unexpected embrace. He said there must be a mistake in the controlled voice he used in business meetings, addressing the middle-aged woman who was hurrying over. Beatrice Lowell, the orphanage director for 15 years, watched the scene with growing curiosity. There was something in the businessman's reaction that didn't match his vehement denial. Her experienced eyes, which had seen hundreds of family reunifications, caught the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands when Amelia touched his tie. Beatrice told Mr. Vance that the girls must be confusing him with someone else, as she tried to gently pull the twins away. She called to Amelia and Olivia, telling them the gentleman had come to make a donation for them. But Olivia insisted that he was Daddy Theo, her eyes filling with tears. She said he had the same smell as the house. Beatrice, intrigued, asked what smell. Amelia replied, sniffing the air near Theodore, that it was a smell of leather and coffee, just like in the big house where their mommy used to take them. Theodore felt a strange churning in his stomach. Indeed, his morning routine always included a strong cup of coffee while inspecting the leathers that arrived at the factory. But that was just a coincidence. He was sure he had never seen these children in his life. He told the girls to listen, crouching down to their level, his voice softening involuntarily. He said his name was Theodore, not Theo, and that he wasn't anyone's father. But Amelia protested that he was, touching his face with her small hands. She said their mommy always talked about him, saying he was good, but that he was scared. The words left Theodore's mouth before he could control them, asking what he was scared of. Olivia replied with the cruel innocence of childhood that he was scared of being alone again. Beatrice noticed how the businessman paled at the girl's answer. During her years caring for orphaned children, she had developed a keen instinct for unresolved situations, and there was definitely something unresolved between this man and the twins. She suggested that perhaps Mr. Vance could tell them a little about himself, inviting him to sit in the small administrative office. She mentioned the girls had arrived 2 years ago. They were found. But Theodore cut her off. Abruptly standing up, he stated he wasn't interested, that he had only come to make the donation and had no time for stories. But as he headed for the door, Amelia ran and stood in front of him, blocking his exit. She told him he couldn't leave again, that Mommy said he always left when he was scared. Theodore exploded louder than he intended, that he didn't know their mother. The silence that followed was heavy. Olivia began to cry softly, while Amelia continued to look at him with a determination that reminded him of someone he couldn't place, but who brought hazy images to his mind of a young, dark-haired woman, always smiling shyly. Beatrice said it was all right, embracing the two girls. She said they would let the gentleman go, and that maybe he would come back another day. Theodore said he wouldn't be back, more to himself than to the others in the room. He had no reason to. But as he walked towards the parking lot, he heard Amelia's voice echoing from the open window. She told Olivia that he would be back, that Mommy said Daddy Theo always comes back when his heart aches. With longing, Theodore stopped beside his black Mercedes, the keys trembling in his hand. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't name pressing against his ribs, as if something long dormant was trying to awaken in his chest. That night, in his empty, impeccably organized house, Theodore couldn't concentrate on the financial reports that always occupied his evenings. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the identical faces of the girls and heard their voices calling him Daddy Theo with a certainty that deeply disturbed him. Across town, at the orphanage, Amelia hugged her rag doll while whispering to Olivia that she told her he would come back, that daddies always come back when you need them. What neither of them knew was that the next morning, Dolores Hope, the orphanage's custodian, would make a revelation that would change everything. Dolores Hope had worked as a custodian at St. Vincent's Orphanage for over 20 years, and her tired eyes had seen many sad stories unfold within those walls. That Tuesday morning, while cleaning the entrance hall, she watched Beatrice pacing back and forth, clearly worried about something. Dolores commented that Mrs. Beatrice had been restless since yesterday, stopping her mopping to observe the director. She asked if it had to do with that rich man who came by. Beatrice sighed, sitting in one of the hall chairs. She asked Dolores if she was there when the twins arrived 2 years ago. Dolores confirmed she was, saying it was a terrible rainy night, and she remembered it like it was yesterday. She leaned her broom against the wall and came closer, asking why she was asking. Beatrice asked if she remembered exactly where they were found. Dolores scratched her head, trying to recall the memory. She said it was at the door of the shoe factory, the big one in the industrial district. The little children were wet, hungry, hugging each other inside a cardboard box. Beatrice's heart raced. She asked which factory. Dolores replied it was Vance Footwear, the biggest in the city. She remembered because the name was written in large letters on the wall, right in front of where they found the girls. Beatrice felt her legs weaken. Theodore Vance was the owner of Vance Footwear. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. She asked if Dolores was sure it was there. Dolores said she was, and that at the time they tried to talk to the factory owner, but he was traveling on business. The doorman had said he'd gone to Chicago and wouldn't be back for a week. At that moment, the twins came running down the stairs, as they did every morning. Amelia held her rag doll, while Olivia carried a small drawing book. Amelia shouted for Aunt Dolores, hugging the custodian's legs. She asked if she saw that Daddy Theo came to see them yesterday. Dolores said she did, and asked what they thought of him. Olivia said he was scared, showing a drawing she had made during the night. She said she drew him there, that he had sad eyes, just like theirs when they first arrived. Beatrice looked at the drawing and was surprised by the child's accuracy. It was clearly Theodore, with his serious expression. But Olivia had captured something in his eyes that she herself had noticed. A deep, ancient sadness. Beatrice asked the girls gently if they remembered anything from before they came here. About their mommy. Amelia and Olivia looked at each other with that mysterious complicity only twins possess. Amelia said their mommy was pretty, that she did sewing and always smelled of thread and fabric. Olivia added that she talked about Daddy Theo, saying he was afraid to like people because when he was little, everyone went away. Dolores and Beatrice exchanged significant glances. The children weren't making up stories. There were too many details, too much consistency in their memories. Beatrice asked if their mommy took them anywhere special. Amelia replied that she took them to her work in a big house that made shoes. There were noisy machines and the floor was cold concrete. They would sit quietly in a corner while she worked. Beatrice pressed, asking if Daddy Theo was there. Olivia explained that sometimes he was. He always wore nice clothes and spoke seriously to everyone. But when he saw them, he would get nervous and leave quickly. Amelia added that their mommy would get sad when he left and would cry secretly in the bathroom. While the girls recounted their fragmented memories across town, Theodore was in his office trying to focus on the monthly balance sheets. But he couldn't stop thinking about the two children. There was something too familiar in their faces, something that made his mind search for memories that seemed to be blocked. His partner, Julian Mercer, entered the office without knocking, as he always did. He told Theodore they needed to talk about the new contract with the Chicago retail chain. Theodore murmured, "Not now," without taking his eyes off the window. Julian asked what he meant by "not now," that the contract was worth $2 million. He approached the desk and asked what was wrong with him, that he left early yesterday, and now he was here looking like a ghost. Theodore finally looked at his partner. He asked Julian if he remembered. An employee named something like Stella or Stella. Julian frowned, asking which Stella, that they had 200 employees. Theodore specified she was a seamstress, who worked there 2 or 3 years ago, a young, dark-haired woman, always very quiet. Julian's expression changed as he said, he was talking about Stella Morris. Of course he remembered. She was one of the best seamstresses they'd ever had. Impeccable work, never late. But she left strangely. Theodore asked how it was strange. Julian explained that one day she was there working normally, and the next day she never showed up again. She didn't even come to pick up her last paycheck. She left some personal belongings in her locker and vanished. Theodore felt a tightness in his chest and asked if she had children. Julian confirmed she did, 2 little twin girls, beautiful children. Sometimes she brought them when she had no one to leave them with. He asked if Theodore remembered seeing them a few times. They always sat quietly in the corner of the sewing section, quiet as 2 little angels. The memory hit him like a punch. 2 identical girls, always holding hands, watching everything with big, curious eyes. And when he passed through the sewing department, they would always wave shyly, and he always pretended not to see because he didn't know how to deal with children. Theodore asked Julian what happened to Stella, why she left. Julian said he didn't know, that at the time Theodore was traveling a lot because of that contract with the Stonebridge Company. When he returned, she had already been gone for a week. He asked about the children, and Julian said they never saw them again. Some employees said she had relatives in the city, that she had probably moved. Theodore stood up abruptly, walking to the window overlooking the factory yard. He told Julian he needed him to do something, to find Stella Morris's address in the human resources files, any information they had on her. Julian asked why, that this was years ago, what was with the sudden interest. But before Theodore could answer, his secretary entered the office. She told Mr. Vance there was a woman here wanting to talk to him, that her name was Carmen Rivera, and it was about 2 children from the orphanage. Theodore and Julian looked at each other. Theodore told her to send her in, feeling that his life was about to change irreversibly. Carmen Rivera entered the office with hesitant steps. She was a woman of about 40, with graying hair and calloused hands. There was something in her eyes that Theodore recognized immediately, fear mixed with determination. She began, her voice trembling slightly, addressing Mr. Vance. She said she worked there 3 years ago and was fired, but that wasn't the point. She came because she heard he had visited St. Vincent's Orphanage yesterday. He asked how she knew. She replied that Northwood was a small city, that news travels fast, and that she had something important to tell him about those twins. Theodore felt his mouth go dry. He asked what she knew about them. Carmen took a deep breath before dropping the bomb that would change everything. She said they were Stella Morris's daughters, and Mr. Vance, Stella didn't disappear as everyone thinks. She's alive, but... Carmen finished, watching as Theodore's face paled with every word. That she's been in a psychiatric clinic in Stonebridge for 2 years. Stella had an accident that greatly affected her mind, and on most days she can't even remember her own name. Theodore leaned on the desk, feeling his legs give way. Julian approached, concerned about his partner's reaction. Theodore asked Carmen how she knew this, completely ignoring Julian. She replied that she was her friend, the only friend Stella had at the factory. She used to tell her things about the two of them. Theodore asked what about the two of them, that he barely knew the woman. Carmen gave a bitter laugh. She said Mr. Vance could fool everyone else, but he couldn't fool her. She saw how he looked at Stella and how she acted when he passed by the sewing section. Theodore felt his mouth go dry. Fragmented memories began to form in his mind. Stella, always with a shy smile when he inspected the work, the way she lowered her eyes when he approached, those brief but intense moments when their gazes met. He dismissed it as ridiculous that she was just an employee. Carmen challenged him, asking if she really was. Then why did he always spend more time in the sewing section when she was working? Why did he always ask the supervisor specifically about her work? Julian watched the conversation with growing discomfort, asking Theodore what this woman was talking about. Theodore finally admitted, the words coming out slowly and heavy with emotion, that Stella was different from the others. She was kind, hard-working. She never asked for favors, never complained. And there was something in her eyes that, Carmen completed his sentence, that it made him remember himself as a child. She said Stella had told her they had talked a few times, conversations about growing up without a family, about how hard it is to trust people when you've been abandoned very early. The revelation hit Theodore like a lightning bolt. He remembered now those late conversations in the office when Stella stayed late to finish an urgent job, how they had started talking about work and ended up talking about life, about fears, about the emptiness they both carried. Theodore murmured about the twins. Carmen said bluntly that they were his daughters. Stella got pregnant after that night in December, 5 years ago. She asked if he remembered the company Christmas party. Theodore closed his eyes, and the memory returned, sharp and painful. The Christmas party, the employees had already left. He and Stella had stayed behind to finish the year-end report. The wine he offered to relax after work, the conversation that stretched into the early morning, the proximity that became inevitable, the moment of vulnerability that turned into intimacy. He whispered, "My God." Carmen continued relentlessly that when Stella found out she was pregnant, she tried to talk to him several times, but he always avoided being alone with her, always made an excuse to leave when she approached. Theodore claimed he didn't know. Carmen retorted that he didn't know because he didn't want to know. Stella had told her that he changed completely after that. Night became distant, cold, started traveling more, avoiding her. She thought she had done something wrong. Julian intervened, clearly annoyed, asking if she was saying Theodore was the father of these children, that it was a very serious accusation. Carmen replied that it wasn't an accusation, it was a fact, and she could prove it. She opened her purse and took out a yellowed envelope. She said Stella gave it to her before the accident, asking her to keep it in case something happened to her. They were letters she wrote to him during her pregnancy, but never delivered. Theodore took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were 5 letters, all addressed to him, all dated 5 years ago. He opened the first with visibly shaking fingers. The letter began with Stella's delicate handwriting, addressing him as Dear Theodore. She didn't know how to tell him this in person because he seemed to be running away from her. She was pregnant. She knew this would scare him because he told her about his fears of abandonment, about how hard it was for him to get attached to people. But he needed to know she didn't expect anything. She just wanted him to know that something good came from that night when they finally allowed themselves to be vulnerable with each other. Theodore stopped reading, feeling tears burn his eyes. Julian tried to read over his shoulder, but Theodore quickly folded the letter. He asked why she never gave him these letters. Carmen answered bitterly that it was because whenever she tried to get close, he always ran away. And then he started traveling so much that she never knew when to find him. In the end, she gave up. He asked about the accident, what happened to her. Carmen sighed deeply. She explained that Stella raised the girls alone for 3 years. She worked here during the day and did sewing at home at night to pay the rent. She was exhausted, broke, without support from anyone. On the day of the accident, she had brought the twins to work because she had no one to leave them with. Julian suddenly said he remembered that day, a rainy Tuesday. There was a problem with one of the sewing machines. Carmen confirmed it was exactly that. Stella was operating the machine when it malfunctioned. A frayed electrical wire fell into the rainwater that was leaking through the roof. She got a shock that left her unconscious for 3 days. Theodore felt the world spin around him. He asked about the girls. Carmen said they stayed at the hospital with her, with no one to care for them. When Stella woke up, she was different, confused, aggressive at times, then very depressed. The doctor said the shock affected a part of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation. Theodore asked why no one told him, my God. Carmen exploded that it was because he was traveling again, and when he came back, they tried to tell him, but he said he didn't want to get involved with employees' personal problems. The memory returned like a slap. Theodore remembered now. Julian had tried to tell him about an injured employee, and he had cut the conversation short, saying that personal issues were not the company's business. He said social workers took the girls because Stella was in no condition to care for them. She was institutionalized, and the children went to the orphanage. Theodore murmured that they were left at the door of their factory, finally connecting all the dots. Carmen explained that Stella had a moment of lucidity the day they were taken. She asked the social workers to pass by here first, saying she wanted her daughters to see the place where she worked one last time. But when they arrived, she was having another crisis. The social workers went out to call for medical help and left the girls waiting at the entrance. When they returned, Stella had fled the car and disappeared. They found her 3 days later, wandering aimlessly on the road to Stonebridge. Theodore sat heavily in his chair, the weight of the revelation crushing all, the emotional defense mechanisms he had built over the years. Carmen's voice softened for the first time as she said, "Mr. Vance, she came here because she saw in the local newspaper that he had visited the orphanage. And because she knew that Stella, even with all her current mental problems, still asks about her daughters in her lucid moments." He asked if she remembered him. Carmen said sometimes she does. She talks about a man who was afraid to love, a man who wore nice suits and smelled of leather and coffee. Theodore buried his face in his hands. For all these years, he had built a meticulously controlled life to avoid exactly this: attachments, emotional responsibilities, the possibility of causing or suffering pain. And now he discovered that his attempt to flee had caused a tragedy that destroyed an entire family. He finally asked where exactly she was institutionalized. Carmen said it was the Hopewell Clinic in Stonebridge, but that Mr. Vance needed to know something. The doctor in charge of her. There was something strange happening there. Theodore lifted his head from his hands and asked what kind of strange thing. Carmen hesitated for a moment before answering. She said that Dr. Philip Travers, who was caring for Stella, seemed to be keeping her institutionalized for longer than necessary. She had visited a few times in the first few months and noticed she was improving. But whenever she asked when she would be discharged, he would say she needed more time. Julian intervened that this wasn't necessarily suspicious, that psychiatric problems are complex. Carmen continued that she thought so too, until she found out that a wealthy family from Chicago was interested in adopting the twins, and that Dr. Travers was facilitating the process, claiming the mother would never be able to care for them again. Theodore felt a cold anger rise in his chest. He asked if the doctor was selling the children. Carmen clarified not exactly selling, but he was receiving a generous donation for the clinic from this family in exchange for keeping Stella institutionalized and declaring her mentally incapacitated forever. Theodore said that was monstrous. Carmen said that's what she thought too, which is why she decided to find him when she heard he had visited the orphanage. Theodore stood up abruptly, stating he was going to the clinic right now. Carmen held his arm, telling him to wait, that there was one more thing he needed to know. Dr. Travers. He had mentioned Mr. Vance's name a few times when she was there. Theodore asked how so. She explained that he knew who the children's father was, and he seemed interested in it, as if he knew him from somewhere. Theodore frowned. The name Philip Travers meant nothing to him, but there was a familiarity he couldn't place. He asked Carmen if she could give him the clinic's address and phone number. She said she could, but Mr. Vance needed to be careful, that this man was not trustworthy. While Carmen wrote down the information, Theodore turned to Julian. He told him to cancel all his appointments for the next few days, that he was going to resolve this situation. Julian warned him to think carefully about what he was doing, that if these children really were his daughters, it would complicate his life enormously, that he had responsibilities to the company, to the employees. Theodore replied that if they were his daughters, then he already had responsibilities he had been ignoring for 5 years. 2 hours later, Theodore was driving on the road to Stonebridge, Stella's letters on the passenger seat. During the journey, he stopped to read the other 4 letters, each one more painful than the last. In the second letter, Stella described how she felt abandoned but was trying to be strong for the children growing in her womb. In the third, she told him about the first doctor's appointments and how she wished he was there. In the fourth, she talked about how she had chosen the names Amelia and Olivia because they were names that sounded strong. Like the daughters of a brave man she still hoped would come back for them. The fifth letter was stained, as if tears had fallen on the paper. She wrote, "Theodore, the girls were born yesterday. They are beautiful and perfect. They have your serious eyes and your thoughtful forehead. I know you're scared of getting attached, but they need you. I need you. I don't know how I'm going to raise 2 children alone, but I promise I will try. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I don't regret that night. It was the first time in my life I felt truly loved." Theodore had to pull the car over to the side of the road to cry. 5 years of lost life, 5 years in which his daughters grew up without a father, and Stella fought alone against difficulties he could have helped her solve. The Hopewell Clinic was in a quiet residential area of Stonebridge. It was an old but well-maintained building, surrounded by gardens that tried to disguise its institutional nature. Theodore parked and watched the place for a few minutes, trying to gather the courage to go inside. At the reception, a young nurse greeted him with a professional smile, asking if she could help him. He said he would like to speak with Dr. Philip Travers about a patient, Stella Morris. The nurse consulted the computer and asked if he was a relative of the patient. Theodore hesitated. He said he was a friend of the family, and he wanted to know about her condition and visitation possibilities. The nurse said Dr. Travers was in a consultation at the moment, but she could call him. She asked for his name. He gave it as Theodore Vance. The nurse wrote down the name and went down an internal corridor. Theodore waited, observing the environment. There was something about the place that made him uncomfortable. It was too clean and organized, as if trying to hide something. 15 minutes later, a man of about 50 approached. He was tall, thin, with graying hair slicked back and thin-rimmed glasses. There was something familiar in his features that made Theodore feel uneasy. The doctor extended his hand, introducing himself as Dr. Philip Travers. He said it was a surprise to see Mr. Vance here. Theodore asked if they knew each other. The doctor replied not directly, but he knew who he was. The successful businessman from Northwood, owner of Vance Footwear. He asked what brought him here. Theodore said he came to inquire about Stella Morris, that he had heard she had been institutionalized here for 2 years. The doctor's expression changed subtly. He said, "Ah, yes, Stella, a very sad case. Severe neurological trauma caused by an electrical accident, unfortunately with no prospect of improvement." Theodore said he would like to see her. The doctor said that wouldn't be advisable, that she doesn't recognize visitors and can become agitated by the presence of strangers. Theodore stated that he wasn't a stranger, that he knew Stella. Very well. Dr. Travers studied him with calculating eyes, asking what kind of relationship he had with her. Theodore asked if that was relevant to the treatment. The doctor replied that everything is relevant when it comes to a patient's mental stability. Theodore took a deep breath. He said Stella worked for him and they had a personal relationship. Dr. Travers said, he understood, the twins' father. The way the doctor said it, without surprise, as if he already knew, put Theodore on alert. He asked how he knew about the children. The doctor said Stella talks about them constantly and about a man who abandoned her, and he imagined that was him. The direct accusation annoyed Theodore. He said, "Doctor, he came here because he heard Stella might be being kept here unnecessarily." Dr. Travers laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. He asked, who told him that? Some disgruntled relative. Theodore asked if it mattered. The doctor said it mattered because there are people who don't understand the complexity of psychiatric treatments, that Stella Morris suffered irreversible neurological damage and will never be able to live alone or care for children. Theodore said he would like a second medical opinion. The doctor said it was his right, but he could guarantee that any competent psychiatrist would reach the same conclusion. Theodore asked if he didn't mind him visiting Stella then. Dr. Travers hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for Theodore to realize something was being hidden. The doctor said of course he could visit her, but he needed to warn him that she might not react well and that any agitation he caused could result in a setback in her treatment. Theodore said he understood. The doctor also needed to inform him that there was a family interested in adopting the children, a stable family with the resources to give the girls everything they need. Theodore retorted that the children already have a mother. The doctor replied coldly that it was a mother who could never care for them again. He told Mr. Vance he knew he must be feeling guilty for abandoning Stella, but prolonging the illusion that she will get better doesn't help anyone. Theodore's voice was now laden with an authority that made the doctor recoil slightly as he said he would like to see Stella now. The doctor said very well, but he needed him to sign a liability waiver exempting the clinic from any problems that might arise from the visit. While signing the papers, Theodore noticed something that made him freeze. On the doctor's desk, there was a photo where he recognized a familiar face, but couldn't place from where. He asked the doctor if they knew each other from somewhere, that his face was familiar. Dr. Travers smiled, and this time there was something sinister in his expression. He said it was possible, Mr. Vance, that sometimes the world is smaller than we think. And as he led Theodore down the corridors towards Stella's room, the doctor murmured too low to be heard, especially when it comes to family. Stella's room was on the 3rd floor of the clinic, in a wing that Dr. Travers explained was reserved for patients with special containment needs. Theodore noticed the corridor was quieter than the rest of the building, and there were security cameras at every corner. The doctor said she was having a relatively calm day as they walked, but as he had warned, she might not recognize him. Theodore nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to expect. Stella's letters had painted a portrait of a strong and caring woman, but Carmen had described someone completely changed by trauma. Dr. Travers stopped before a door marked 307. He said Stella's name. knocking lightly on the door before opening it. He announced she had a visitor. What Theodore saw made him stagger. Stella was sitting in a chair near the window, looking at the garden with empty eyes. She had lost a lot of weight. Her dark hair was now cut very short, and there was a sickly pallor to her skin that contrasted with the vibrant woman. He remembered. He said her name softly, Stella. She turned slowly, and for a moment their eyes met. Theodore saw a flicker of recognition cross her face, followed by confusion. She asked if she knew him, her voice sounding fragile and uncertain. Theodore approached slowly, as if she were a wounded animal that might get scared. He said his name was Theodore, that they had met a few years ago. She repeated the name Theodore, as if testing its flavor. She asked where. He replied that she worked for him at the shoe factory. Stella frowned, clearly struggling to access. Fragmented memories. She mentioned shoes, that she made beautiful shoes with small stitches. He confirmed that was right, that she was one of the best seamstresses who ever worked there. She whispered the word seamstress, looking at her own hands. She said her hands hurt sometimes, as if they remembered something she couldn't. Dr. Travers watched the interaction with clinical attention, but Theodore noticed something else in his expression, something like irritation or concern. Theodore said carefully, "Stella, do you remember your daughters?" The effect was immediate and devastating. Stella stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair, and began pacing the small room. She murmured girls, her hands trembling. 2 girls, exactly alike. She asked where her girls were. Theodore quickly said they were safe, in a place where they were being well cared for. Stella suddenly shouted, no, that they needed her. They were small, still babies. She asked where her baby was. Dr. Travers intervened immediately, telling Mr. Vance he thought it was best to end the visit, that she was getting agitated. But Theodore ignored the doctor and approached Stella. He told her to listen, that her daughters were no longer babies. They were 4 years old now, and they remembered her. She stopped walking and looked directly into his eyes, asking 4 years. She asked how long she had been here. He replied 2 years. Her voice was a horrified whisper as she repeated 2 years, that she had lost 2 years of their lives. Dr. Travers said firmly that he needed to insist that Mr. Vance stop, that the patient was clearly becoming disturbed. Theodore asked the doctor to let him talk to her for a few more minutes. The doctor said it wasn't possible and asked him to come with him. But at that moment, Stella did something that surprised everyone. She approached Theodore and touched his face with trembling fingers. She said he smelled like leather and coffee, a tear running down her cheek. Like him, like her girl's father. Theodore murmured her name. She asked if he was him, the man who ran away when he found out about the babies, the man who was afraid to love. The accusation hurt more than Theodore expected. He said, Stella, he didn't know about the pregnancy. She never told him. She exclaimed, her voice breaking, that she tried so many times, but he was always traveling, always busy, always... Theodore completed her thought, always running away, the guilt crushing his chest. He said she was right, he was running away. Dr. Travers tried to intervene again, but Stella ignored him completely, her full attention focused on Theodore. She suddenly said the letters, that she wrote letters to him and asked where they were. He said Carmen gave them to him, that he had read them all. Stella smiled for the first time since he arrived, saying Carmen was her friend, that she visits her and brought her pictures of the girls. He asked about the pictures. She said they were hidden under the mattress, that he didn't know she had them. Stella rushed to the bed and with frantic movements lifted the mattress. From there, she took out a small envelope with several crumpled photos. She told him to look, showing the photos to Theodore. She said they were them, her beautiful girls. Theodore took the photos with trembling hands. They were images of Amelia and Olivia at the orphanage, clearly taken by Carmen during her visits. In all of them, the twins were together, always holding hands, always with the same serious expression. In their eyes, Stella said softly that they had his eyes and his forehead when they were thinking about something important. Dr. Travers interrupted with authority, saying this visit needed to end now, that the patient was clearly disturbed and it could cause a severe relapse. Theodore argued that she was lucid, more lucid than the doctor had told him she would be. The doctor claimed they were transient moments, that she would have a crisis in the next few hours. He guaranteed it. Stella turned to the doctor with an expression Theodore had never seen on her before. Pure anger. She pointed a trembling finger at him and accused him of giving her medicine that makes her head fuzzy, of telling her she'll never get better, that he lies. Dr. Travers told Stella she was having an episode and needed to calm down. She shouted no, that he didn't want her to get better, that he wanted her to forget her daughters forever. Dr. Travers pressed a button on the wall, and in seconds 2 orderlies appeared at the door. He ordered them to take the patient for sedation. Stella clung to Theodore's arm, pleading not to let them take. That when they give her those injections, she forgets everything, forgets the girls, forgets him, forgets who she is. Theodore didn't know what to do. As the orderlies approached, she said desperately that he needed to know about Grandma's jewels, that they were in the doll the girls have. He asked what doll, what jewels. But before she could answer, the orderlies grabbed her. She screamed about her grandmother's jewels as she was dragged away, that it was all she could leave for them, not to let anyone get it, that the doll has a secret. Dr. Travers, his voice now cold and calculating, told Mr. Vance that, as he could see, the patient was completely delusional, that these fantasies about jewels and dolls were clear symptoms of her condition. But Theodore wasn't convinced. There was something too much in the doctor's violent reaction, in the rush to sedate Stella just when she was most lucid. Theodore said he would like to talk to other doctors who had cared for her. Dr. Travers stated he was the only doctor responsible for her case. Theodore asked if in 2 years no other professional had examined her. The doctor said there was no need. The diagnosis was clear. Theodore asked if he wouldn't mind him hiring a second medical opinion. The pause was brief but significant. The doctor said of course it was Mr. Vance's right, but he must warn him that any external interference in the treatment could be harmful to the patient. Theodore said he understood. As they left the room, Theodore noticed something he hadn't before. On Stella's nightstand was a small children's drawing, clearly made by one of the twins. The drawing showed a family, 2 small girls, a woman, and a tall man in a suit. He asked the doctor who brought the drawing. The doctor said he didn't know, probably some nurse trying to be kind. But Theodore knew he was lying, and he began to realize that Dr. Philip Travers was hiding much more than Stella's true mental state. When they reached the reception, Theodore turned to the doctor. He said before he left, he'd like to ask one last thing. Where did they know each other from? He was sure he had seen his face before. Dr. Travers smiled, but his eyes remained cold. He said, as he mentioned before, Mr. Vance, sometimes the world is smaller than we think, especially for people who grew up in the same orphanage. The revelation hit Theodore like a lightning bolt. He froze in the middle of the reception, looking at Dr. Travers's face with a new perspective. Now he could see it. The same dark eyes, the same face shape, the same jawline he saw in the mirror every morning. Theodore stated, more as a realization than a question, that he was his brother. Dr. Travers corrected him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, half-brother to be precise, same father, different mothers. He asked if Theodore remembered St. Clair's orphanage, didn't he, Theodore? The memories returned in painful fragments. The orphanage in Stonebridge, where he had spent the first 12 years of his life. The other boys, the fights for food, the constantly changing caregivers. And yes, there was a younger boy, 2 years younger, who always tried to get close to him. Theodore whispered his name, Philip. Little Philip. He always tried to sleep in the bed next to his. The doctor replied it was because he was his older brother, his only relative in the world, but he never wanted anything to do with him, did he remember? The accusation brought back the pain Theodore had tried to forget for decades. He remembered now how he had rejected the smaller boy who insisted on calling him brother, how he had shut himself off emotionally to survive the harshness of the orphanage. Theodore said, "Philip, he was just a child." The doctor agreed and said he was an even smaller child who needed his older brother, but he was completely ignored. He pretended he didn't exist. Theodore asked what this had to do with Stella. Dr. Travers moved closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. He said it had everything to do with it. Did he know what it was like to grow up knowing you have a brother who rejects you, who would rather be alone than acknowledge your existence? Theodore murmured his name. Dr. Travers continued that when he found out Theodore had become a successful businessman in Northwood, he looked for him, wanting to try to rebuild their relationship. But he wouldn't even see him. His secretary said he didn't have time for people from the past. Theodore vaguely remembered. About 3 years ago, his secretary had mentioned that a doctor from Stonebridge wanted to schedule a meeting, claiming to be an acquaintance from childhood. He had dismissed the meeting without a second thought. The doctor said so when Stella Morris arrived here, talking about a man named Theodore who had abandoned her, and he saw his address in the documents. Well, it was as if fate had given him an opportunity. An opportunity for what? An opportunity to make him feel what he felt. Abandonment, rejection, the pain of knowing that the people who should love you simply ignore you. Theodore asked if he kept Stella institutionalized, unnecessarily to get revenge on him. Dr. Travers claimed he kept Stella institutionalized because she needed treatment, but he confessed he didn't try very hard to speed up her recovery. Theodore felt a cold anger rise in his chest, pointing out she has daughters, children who need their mother. The doctor retorted, asking about the same daughters he abandoned, how it was interesting he cared about them now. Theodore insisted he didn't know about their existence. The doctor countered that he knew the moment they were born, that Stella had told him everything during their sessions, how she tried to talk to him, how he avoided her, how he traveled right when she needed support the most. Every word was like a blade. Theodore knew his brother was right. He had cowardly fled his responsibilities. He asked about the jewels she mentioned. The doll. Dr. Travers shrugged, calling them delusions, that Stella sometimes talks about an inheritance from her grandmother, but it's just another fantasy from her fragmented mind. Theodore asked if he was sure. Dr. Travers said, "Theodore, he's been a psychiatrist for 15 years. He knows how to distinguish reality from fantasy." But there was something in Philip's tone that didn't convince Theodore. He demanded to see her complete medical file. The doctor said that wasn't possible, that medical information is confidential. Theodore asserted his rights as the father of her daughters. The doctor told him to prove he was the father, and Theodore said he would get a DNA test. The doctor said great, but until it was legally proven, he had no rights related to Stella or her daughters. Theodore realized he was being skillfully manipulated by his brother. He asked Philip what he really wanted. The doctor said he wanted justice, for him to feel what it's like to have your family destroyed by abandonment. He asked about Philip's family. The doctor said he had one, a wife and a daughter, who left 2 years ago because he became obsessive and distant, working with traumatized patients. Ironically, it was by caring for abandoned people that he himself became abandoned. Theodore began to understand the extent of his brother's bitterness. He told Philip he was sorry, but that didn't justify what he was doing to Stella. The doctor asked if it didn't, that he destroyed a woman's life out of cowardice, and he was just prolonging the consequences of that destruction. And what about the twins? What fault was it of theirs? The doctor said the twins would be fine, that the Caldwell family from Chicago was rich and stable. They would give the girls everything they need. Theodore said, except their real mother. The doctor replied that the real mother no longer exists, that the woman he saw today is a shadow, and even if he released her tomorrow, she would never be able to care for two children alone. Theodore called it a lie. The doctor insisted it was the truth, that the neurological trauma was real, that Stella has moments of lucidity, but also has severe crises of depression and anxiety, and it would be dangerous to leave her alone with small children. Theodore studied his brother's face, trying to discern how much was truth and how much was manipulation. He offered to help her, to pay for the best treatment, to hire the best specialists. The doctor asked why, out of guilt. Theodore replied it was responsibility. She was the mother of his daughters. The doctor laughed bitterly, finding it funny how they only became his daughters now that he discovered they exist. Theodore pleaded with Philip to stop this revenge, to talk like brothers, to try to solve their problems without involving innocent people. The doctor's voice turned icy as he asked about being brothers, that he never considered him a brother, so why start now? Theodore replied that it was because he was wrong, because he was a scared child who didn't know how to handle emotional attachments, because now he was an adult who wants to correct the mistakes of the past. The doctor found it very convenient, but too late. Theodore insisted it was never too late. The doctor said for Stella it was, the damage was done. Theodore asked to be allowed to try to repair it. Dr. Travers was silent for a long moment, studying Theodore. Then he stated there was one condition. When asked what, he said that Theodore would have to publicly acknowledge paternity of the twins, legally recognizing them as his daughters. Theodore agreed, saying it was already his intention to do so. The doctor added that he would have to pay for Stella's treatment in full, without questioning his methods or schedule. When asked for how long, the doctor said for as long as he deemed necessary. Theodore realized he was being blackmailed, but saw no alternative and agreed. Dr. Travers added one more thing with a cruel smile, that the Caldwell family had already started the adoption proceedings, and to cancel the process, he would have to prove in court that he was capable of caring for the twins alone. Theodore asked what he meant by alone. The doctor explained that Stella wouldn't be available to care for them anytime soon, and a single man, a workaholic businessman, would have a hard time convincing a judge that he could be a suitable father for two 4-year-old girls. The trap was complete. Philip had engineered a situation where Theodore would have to fight not only against his own limitations, but against a legal system that would favor an established couple over an inexperienced single father. Theodore said he planned it all, a mix of admiration and horror in his voice. Dr. Travers replied that he learned from the best, that Theodore was always an excellent strategist in business, and he decided to apply the same methodology to personal life. Theodore asked what would happen if he refused his conditions. The doctor replied that then Stella would remain institutionalized indefinitely, and the twins would be adopted by the Caldwell family next week, as the process was almost finalized. Theodore felt cornered, but a determination he hadn't felt in years was growing in his chest. For the first time in his life, he had something to fight for that went beyond profits and contracts. He finally said he accepted his conditions. The doctor said excellent, that they would see each other soon, and he was sure it would be educational for him to discover what it means to be truly responsible for other people. When Theodore left the clinic, it was already getting dark. The entire way back to Northwood, a single question hammered in his mind. How could a man who had spent his entire life avoiding emotional attachments convince a judge that he could be a father to two traumatized children? And more importantly, was he really prepared to take on this responsibility? Or was he just being driven by guilt and the desire to defeat his brother's revenge? The next morning, Theodore arrived at St. Vincent's Orphanage with a determination that surprised even himself. He had been awake all night, devising a plan that seemed impossible, but was his only chance to keep the twins away from the Caldwell family and close to their real mother. Beatrice greeted him with evident curiosity, saying she didn't expect to see him again so soon. Theodore told her he needed to talk to her about something very important, about Amelia and Olivia. She asked what he had discovered about them. He revealed that he had discovered they were indeed his daughters. The silence that followed was heavy. Beatrice sat down slowly, processing the information. She asked how he could be sure. He explained that he had visited their mother yesterday, Stella Morris, and that she was institutionalized in a psychiatric clinic in Stonebridge for 2 years. Beatrice whispered, "My God," that the poor girls believed their mother was no longer in this world. Theodore said the situation was more complicated than it seemed, and he needed her help. Beatrice led him to her office, where they could talk in private. She told him to tell her everything. Theodore explained his relationship with Stella, the undelivered letters, the accident, and the institutionalization, but he omitted the details about Dr. Travers being his brother and the possible medical manipulations. Beatrice asked what he would do now. He said he needed to prove he could care for the girls, that there was a rich family interested in adopting them, and the process was nearly finalized. Beatrice, with all due respect, asked if he had any experience with children, especially children who have been through trauma. He admitted he had none, but he could learn. She questioned him learning while caring for 2 4-year-old girls, stating that this wasn't an experiment. These were human lives. The criticism hit Theodore hard, but he knew she was right. He told Beatrice, he knew it sounded irresponsible, but these children were his daughters, and their mother was alive and could recover. Separating them now would destroy any chance of family reunification. Beatrice asked, what if the mother didn't recover? He replied that then he would be the father he should have been from the start. Beatrice watched Theodore intently. She asked why he had changed his mind so drastically that yesterday he seemed genuinely confused by the girl's claims. He replied that yesterday he was still running from responsibility, from commitment, from the risk of getting hurt or hurting others, but he couldn't run anymore. At that moment, the sound of running footsteps echoed down the hall. Amelia and Olivia appeared at the office door, still in their pajamas, their hair tousled from sleep. Amelia shouted, "Daddy Theo," running to hug him. Olivia said he really came back, her eyes shining with joy. Theodore knelt and hugged the 2 girls, feeling an overwhelming emotion take over his chest. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly look at them, at the features that were his, at the gestures that reminded him of Stella, at the absolute trust with which they gave themselves to his embrace. Amelia touched his face and asked if Mommy was coming to get them today. The question struck Theodore like an arrow. Beatrice watched him, clearly wanting to see how he would handle the situation. He told Amelia and Olivia that he needed to talk to them about their mommy. The 2 sat on his lap, as attentive as 2 little birds. He explained that their mommy didn't go away forever as they thought. The twins' eyes widened. Olivia whispered, asking if she was alive. He confirmed she was alive, but she was sick, in a place where doctors were taking care of her to make her well. Amelia asked if they could visit her. He said soon, yes, but until she was completely well, they needed someone to take care of them. Olivia said Aunt Beatrice takes care of them, looking at the director with affection. He agreed, but said Aunt Beatrice takes care of many children, and they needed someone just for them. Amelia asked if he would take care of them, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The simplicity of the question left Theodore momentarily speechless. He said he would like to very much, but he didn't know if he was good at taking care of children. Olivia said excitedly that they would teach him, that it was easy, he just needed to give them food, tell stories, and give them affection. Amelia added that he shouldn't yell when they make a mess, and that he should play with them sometimes. Beatrice smiled despite the seriousness of the situation, remarking that it seemed they already had an instruction manual for him. Suddenly, Amelia asked Daddy Theo if he was afraid of them. He asked why she asked that. She replied that Mommy always said he was afraid of liking people. Theodore looked into the two girls' eyes, his own eyes reflected back at him, and felt something break and reassemble simultaneously in his chest. He admitted that yes, he was afraid. But sometimes you have to do scary things when they are important. Olivia asked if they were important. He told them they were the most important things that had ever happened in his life. The twins smiled and snuggled against him, and Theodore felt his life had irrevocably changed in that moment. After the girls left for breakfast, Beatrice told Mr. Vance she needed to be honest with him, that even if she supported his decision, there were complex legal issues. The girls had been wards of the state for 2 years, and for him to gain custody, he would need to undergo psychological, social, and financial evaluations. He asked how long that usually takes. She said months, sometimes more than a year. He stated they didn't have that time, that the family interested in the adoption could finalize the process at any moment. She asked what he proposed. Theodore took a deep breath before making the proposal he had devised during the sleepless night. He said he wanted to move in here temporarily, into the orphanage. Beatrice asked what he meant. He explained he wanted to spend the next few months living there, learning to care for the girls in the environment where they feel safe, proving he could be a suitable father. Beatrice was silent for a long moment. She told Mr. Vance that this was unconventional, that they had never had a potential father living at the orphanage. He replied that unconventional circumstances require unconventional solutions. She asked about his work, his company. He said Julian could manage the factory for a few months, that it was time to figure out what was truly a priority in his life. Beatrice hesitantly said there was another issue, that the girls had special medical needs. He asked what kind of needs. She explained that Amelia has chronic asthma and needs daily medication and regular nebulizer treatments, and Olivia has a mild neurological condition that requires physical therapy and constant monitoring, and the costs are high. He said money was not an issue. She retorted that it wasn't just about money, Mr. Vance. They were children who need specialized care, specific routines, and constant medical attention, and that the Caldwell family had experience with special needs children, having already adopted 2 others with similar needs. Theodore felt despair grow in his chest. Every new piece of information seemed to make his task more impossible. He asked Beatrice what she advised. She honestly advised him to get to know the girls better before making a final decision, to spend a few days there, see their routine, understand the real challenges, and if he was still determined after that, then they could talk about the next steps. He asked if he could start today. Beatrice hesitated. He pleaded, saying every day that passes is one less day with them. Beatrice sighed, saying all right, he could stay in the guest room they use for visitors, but on one condition: any sign that his presence was disturbing the girls or other orphans, the experiment would end immediately. He accepted. That afternoon, Theodore was sitting in the small room that would be his home for the next few months, looking at the small bag he had packed in a hurry. Through the window, he could see Amelia and Olivia playing in the yard with other children, and for the first time since he could remember, he felt he was where he should be. But his tranquility was interrupted by a call that would change everything again. It was Dr. Travers. He said, "Theodore, he heard he moved into the orphanage. What admirable dedication." Theodore asked what he wanted. The doctor said he wanted to give him some information that might be useful about the jewels Stella mentioned. Theodore thought he said they were delusions. The doctor replied that perhaps he was mistaken, that today, during a session, she gave him details too, specific to be fantasies. Theodore asked what details. He said she mentioned the twins' doll has a secret compartment in its chest, where a necklace that belonged to her grandmother is hidden, a necklace of sentimental and financial value. Theodore felt his heart race. He asked why he was telling him this. The doctor replied that if this necklace really exists and has value, it could help in his custody case, showing that the girls have a family inheritance that should be preserved. Theodore noted it could also complicate things if the Caldwell family found out about it. The doctor said exactly, which is why he suggested he find the doll before others discovered it. The call ended, leaving Theodore with another piece of a puzzle that was becoming more complex with each revelation. And now he needed to find out if the twins really had with them a doll with a secret that could change everything. That night, Theodore waited patiently until all the orphans were asleep to talk discreetly with the twins about the doll. He found them in the room they shared with two other girls, whispering softly to each other as they always did before bed. Amelia asked Daddy Theo if he was going to sleep here tonight when she saw him at the door. He said yes, in the room at the end of the hall, but before they slept, he wanted to ask something. The two sat up in bed, curious. Theodore approached and spoke in a low voice so as not to wake the other children. He asked if they remembered the doll they had when they arrived, the one they always carried. Olivia and Amelia looked at each other with that silent communication only twin sisters possessed. Olivia finally said it was Violet, their mummy's doll from when she was little. He asked where it was now. Amelia replied that it was hidden, looking nervously at the other sleeping children. She said Aunt Dolores told them to keep it very safe because other children might want to take it. He asked if they could show him. The twins hesitated. Olivia asked suspiciously why. Theodore realized he had to be careful. He explained that maybe this doll has something special from their family, something their mommy wanted them to know. Amelia exclaimed softly about Grandma Celeste, that Mommy always talked about Grandma Celeste. He said that's right, the doll might have something that belonged to Grandma Celeste. The girls got up silently and signaled for him to follow. They tiptoed out of the room and went down to the orphanage's basement, where the personal belongings of children who arrived with possessions were stored. Olivia whispered, pointing to a high shelf, that it was there. Theodore reached for a cardboard box and opened it carefully. Inside, among some small, well-worn clothes, was a rag doll that had seen better days. Its brown wool hair was messy, its floral dress faded, but it was still preserved with the care only a child can have for a beloved toy. He asked if this was Violet. The two confirmed in chorus that it was. Theodore examined the doll carefully. At first glance, it looked like just an old, well-loved toy. But when he touched the doll's chest, he felt something rigid under the fabric. He asked the girls if they knew Violet had something special inside. Amelia replied that Mommy said she kept family secrets, but they could never open it. He asked if he could try. The twins nodded, curious to discover the mystery they had carried for so long without knowing. Theodore found a small, disguised seam on the doll's back. Carefully, he began to undo the delicate stitches. Inside the cotton stuffing, his fingers found something hard wrapped in a piece of silk. When he unwrapped the object, the three of them fell silent. It was an antique necklace with a delicate gold chain and a pendant that was clearly a family heirloom. A small flower of diamonds that, even in the dim light of the basement, sparkled with a fire that indicated genuine stones. Olivia whispered that it was beautiful. Amelia asked if it belonged to Grandma Celeste. Theodore replied that it must have, observing the piece with admiration. He wasn't an expert, but he could recognize quality jewelry. That necklace was worth a small fortune, but its sentimental value was incalculable. Amelia asked why Mommy hid it. He replied probably so they would have it when they grew up. It was the inheritance she could leave for them. At that moment, they heard footsteps upstairs. Theodore quickly pocketed the necklace and put the doll back in the box. He told them to go back to the room and that this would be their secret for now. The twins agreed, excited by the discovery, but not fully understanding its importance. The next day, Theodore took the necklace to be appraised by a discreet jeweler in Northwood. His suspicion was confirmed. The piece was worth approximately $50,000 and was genuinely old, probably from the early 20th century. But more important than the financial value was what it represented. Stella had saved the only valuable thing she owned for her daughters, hiding it in a way that not even in her most desperate moments had she considered selling. Theodore was returning to the orphanage when he received a call that left him in shock. It was a lawyer from Chicago. A Dr. Marcus Shaw, representing the Caldwell family, said he would like to schedule an urgent meeting with Mr. Vance. When asked about what, he said it was about the twins, Amelia and Olivia, that they heard he was contesting the adoption process. He asked how they knew. The lawyer stated that their family has the resources to monitor processes that interest them, and they would like to propose a deal. He asked what kind of deal. The lawyer preferred to talk in person, asking if they could meet that afternoon at his office. Theodore said no. If they wanted to talk, it would be at the orphanage in the presence of the director. There was a pause. The lawyer agreed, saying they would be there at 4 o'clock. Theodore hung up with a bad feeling. The Caldwell family was clearly not just wealthy, they had influence and information they shouldn't have access to so easily. At 4 o'clock sharp, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the orphanage. An elegantly dressed man and woman got out, accompanied by the lawyer and, to Theodore's surprise, Dr. Travers. Theodore asked his brother what he was doing here when they all gathered in the director's office. The lawyer explained that Dr. Travers was the medical professional responsible for the children's psychological evaluation for adoption, and his opinion was crucial in the process. Theodore realized the trap was even more sophisticated than he had imagined. His brother wasn't just manipulating Stella's treatment, he was also influencing the twins' adoption process. The woman introduced herself as Sandra Caldwell, saying they were a family who had already adopted 2 children with special needs, and they had the experience, structure, and resources to give the twins everything they need. Theodore replied that they already had a father. Her husband, Robert Caldwell, retorted that it was a father who abandoned them for 4 years, a single man with no experience with children who works 12 hours a day. Theodore asked how they knew about his work schedule. The lawyer said they had done their research and discovered interesting things. For example, that he had never had lasting relationships, had fired employees for personal complications, and had a history of avoiding emotional attachments. Beatrice intervened, saying with all due respect that information was irrelevant, and what mattered was Mr. Vance's current ability to care for the girls. Dr. Travers said with a smile that was exactly what they wanted to talk about. He asked Mr. Vance how his experience living at the orphanage was going. Theodore replied that it was enriching. The doctor asked if it really was, because they had heard that last night he was seen taking the girls to the basement, a somewhat suspicious behavior for someone who should be establishing healthy bonds. Theodore felt his blood boil. Someone had seen them last night and reported it to Dr. Travers. He said there was nothing suspicious about getting to know the children and their belongings better. Sandra Caldwell became interested, asking about belongings. Theodore said personal things, toys, family keepsakes. The lawyer said they should get straight to the point, that their proposal was simple. Mr. Vance would drop the contestation of the adoption process, and in return, they would guarantee the girls receive the best possible education and could maintain contact with him as a secondary father figure. A secondary father figure, the lawyer clarified. Supervised bi-weekly visits, birthday presents, participation in important school events, a controlled but present relationship. Theodore asked if they were offering to let him buy visits to his own daughters. Robert said they were offering a deal that benefits everyone. The girls get a stable family, he maintains some contact, and they avoid a draining legal battle. Theodore asked what would happen if he refused. Dr. Travers spoke up, saying then they would have to consider whether his presence at the orphanage was truly beneficial for the children. Yesterday, for example, he noticed that Amelia had an asthma attack after the nocturnal exploration. It was a lie, and Theodore knew it. But he also knew his brother had medical credibility he couldn't easily contest. The lawyer said they needed an answer by tomorrow, hoping he would make the right decision. When everyone left, Beatrice turned to Theodore, asking what really happened in the basement yesterday. Theodore showed her the necklace, explaining about the conversation with the girls and the discovery of the hidden treasure. Beatrice said, "My God," examining the jewel, that this changed everything. He asked how. She explained that if the girls have a significant family inheritance, it proves they have roots, history, an identity that cannot be simply transferred to another. Family, which is a strong legal argument, but he noted it could also be a reason for the Caldwell family to want to adopt them even more. Beatrice agreed, which is why he needed to keep it safe and not tell anyone else. That night, Theodore couldn't sleep. He knew he was facing adversaries far more powerful and organized than he had imagined, and he was beginning to realize that the battle for the twins would be much dirtier than he expected. Theodore's answer came the next morning, but not in the way the Caldwell family expected. Instead of accepting the proposal, he did something that surprised everyone. He called a press conference in the orphanage's courtyard. Beatrice asked, alarmed as she saw the journalists arriving, what he was doing. Theodore replied, adjusting his tie, that he was changing the rules of the game. If they want to play dirty, they would make everything public. At 10 in the morning, under the strong northward sun, Theodore stood before the cameras with Amelia and Olivia by his side, holding their small hands. He said his name was Theodore Vance, and these were his daughters, Amelia and Olivia. He came forward today because he believes every child has the right to grow up knowing their true story. The journalists' questions came quickly. They asked why he was only now acknowledging paternity, where he had been during the first years of the children's lives. He replied, his voice firm despite his emotion, that he had made a terrible mistake. Out of fear and cowardice, he had distanced himself from the girl's mother when she needed support the most, and that mistake resulted in years of unnecessary suffering for a family he should have protected. They asked about the mother's situation now. He explained. Their mother, Stella Morris, was in a psychiatric clinic in Stonebridge, recovering from trauma caused by a work accident. She was getting better but needed time and the best possible treatment. They asked about the family interested in adopting the twins and if he would contest it. He said he would fight with all his strength to keep his daughters with him until their mother is in a position to actively participate in their upbringing, that these children are not orphans. They have living parents who love them. During the press conference, Theodore noticed a black Mercedes parked at a distance with tinted windows. He knew the Caldwell family and Dr. Travers were watching, and that was exactly what he wanted. After the journalists left, Beatrice confronted him. She said it was risky, that he had made the situation public and would now face pressure from all sides. He replied it was the only way to level the playing field, that now they couldn't conduct their manipulations in the shadows. She asked what if it harmed the girls, if they became the center of a media battle. Before Theodore could answer, his cell phone rang. It was Julian, clearly agitated. He asked what the hell Theodore was doing. He just saw it on TV. Their company was going to be in the middle of this scandal. Theodore said it wasn't a scandal, they were his daughters. Julian questioned him having daughters, since when and why he didn't tell him anything. Theodore said because until a week ago he didn't know himself, and because he knew Julian would react exactly like this. Julian accused him of destroying everything they had built, that their clients wouldn't want to be associated with a company involved in controversial custody disputes. Theodore suggested that maybe it was time to reevaluate their priorities as a company. Julian couldn't believe he was saying that he was throwing away 20 years of work for 2 children he barely knew. Theodore stated that those children were his family, and if that was a problem for Julian, they could discuss his departure from the partnership. The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. Julian finally said he would think about it before hanging up. That afternoon, the consequences of the press conference began to appear. The first sign was a call from Dr. Travers. He said, "Theodore, what a beautiful performance, very touching." Theodore asked what he wanted. The doctor said he wanted to congratulate him on his strategy, that going public was smart, but was he sure he was prepared for what comes next? Theodore said he was prepared for anything. The doctor asked if he really was, because he had just received a very interesting call from the district attorney's office, and it seemed someone had made an anonymous complaint about possible negligence at the orphanage. Theodore's blood ran cold. He asked what kind of complaint. The doctor listed allegations that unauthorized. Adults have unrestricted access to the children. There are failures in nighttime supervision, and that the children's personal belongings are being handled improperly. Theodore accused him. The doctor claimed he did nothing, just fulfilled his duty to report situations that could compromise the well-being of the children under his evaluation. Theodore called it blackmail. The doctor called it child protection, and the result would be an investigation that could lead to the immediate transfer of the twins to a temporary family until the case is resolved. Theodore asked if it would be a temporary family or the Caldwell family. The doctor said that wasn't up to him, but it just so happens that the Caldwell family already has authorization for emergency temporary placement. Theodore realized he had fallen into a trap. By making the situation public, he had given his adversaries the perfect excuse to speed up the process. He told Philip to stop, that he was destroying the lives of innocent children to get revenge on him. The doctor claimed it wasn't revenge, it was justice, that he destroyed a family out of cowardice, and now he would learn what it means to lose the people you love. He asked about Stella, if he would keep her institutionalized forever. The doctor said Stella was exactly where she needed to be and would stay there until he determined she was fit for society. Theodore accused him of abusing his medical power. The doctor claimed he was exercising his professional judgment, the difference being that Theodore had no authority to question his medical decisions. The call ended, leaving Theodore in a state of panic. He needed a lawyer, he needed help, he needed a miracle. That night, while helping the twins get ready for bed, Theodore tried to maintain an appearance of normality, but Amelia, with her childish sensitivity, sensed something was wrong. She asked Daddy Theo if he was sad. He admitted he was a little. When asked why, he said because some people don't want them to be together. Isadora came closer and held his hand, saying, but they wanted to be with him. He said he wanted to be with them forever. Amelia said then, it will be all right, with the absolute confidence only children possess, that the things you really want always work out. Theodore hugged them both, wishing he had the same certainty they showed. But his momentary tranquility was interrupted by shouts from downstairs. Beatrice was arguing with someone in the main hall. Theodore left the girls with Dolores and went down to see what was happening. At the entrance of the orphanage were 3 social workers, accompanied by 2 court officers with documents in hand. Theodore asked what was happening. One of the social workers replied it was a court order for emergency transfer, that the girls Amelia and Olivia were to be transferred immediately to a temporary foster family. When asked on what grounds, she said a complaint of irregularities in the supervision of minors, that the orphanage was under investigation and the children needed to be protected during the process. Beatrice was pale. She told Mr. Vance there was nothing they could do, it was a court order. He asked where they would go. She said with the Caldwell family, who already have authorization for emergency placement. Theodore felt the world crumble around him. In less than 24 hours, his attempt to protect his daughters had resulted in losing them completely. He asked if he could say goodbye to them. The social worker said quickly that they had orders to execute the transfer immediately. Theodore went up the stairs on legs that barely supported him. He found the twins waiting in the hallway, clearly frightened by the strange commotion. Amelia asked what was happening. He told the girls they would have to go to a different house for a few days. Olivia started to cry, asking why if they had done something wrong. He assured them they had done nothing wrong, it was just adult complications. But they wanted to stay with him. He said he wanted to stay with them too, but sometimes you can't do what you want. Theodore hugged the two girls, feeling as if his heart was being torn from his chest. He told them to listen carefully, no matter where they were. They would always be his daughters, and he would fight every day to bring them back. Amelia asked through her tears if he promised. He promised, and said, "Daddies don't break promises." As the social workers took the twins away, Theodore remained at the window, watching until the car disappeared into the dark night. Beatrice approached and put a hand on his shoulder. She said softly that it wasn't over. This was just one battle, not the war. But Theodore knew he had made a fatal mistake, and now his daughters were in the exact hands of the people he was trying to protect them from. 3 days passed since the twins were taken, and Theodore had become a shadow of himself. He couldn't sleep, barely ate, and spent his hours walking the streets of Northwood like a ghost tormented by his own incompetence. It was during one of these aimless walks that he received an unexpected call. It was Carmen Rivera, the former employee who had started this whole discovery. She said, "Mr. Vance," she needed to talk to him urgently. She had discovered something about Dr. Travers that could change everything. When asked what, she preferred not to talk on the phone and suggested meeting at the cafe on the central square in an hour. Theodore arrived to find Carmen visibly agitated, constantly looking over her shoulder as if she were being followed. She told him what happened. She said she shouldn't be doing this, but she remembered telling him she visited Stella at the clinic. In recent weeks, she had started noticing strange things. First, other patients who seemed fine also never got discharged. Second, Dr. Travers always found an excuse to not let families talk to the patients alone. She continued, saying she started asking discreet questions to the nurses. One of them, Roberta, was an acquaintance from when they worked together at a factory. She told her there are patients at the clinic who have been there for years, even though they are apparently cured. Theodore felt a chill down his spine, asking if she thought Dr. Travers was keeping people institutionalized unnecessarily. She said it was worse than that. Roberta told her he has a deal with some wealthy families in the region. When they want to get rid of inconvenient relatives or dispute inheritances, they institutionalize the person in his clinic with false diagnoses. Theodore called it criminal. She said it was, and there was more. Roberta showed her some medical records. She told Mr. Vance that Stella was not as sick as he made it seem. She has episodes of confusion, yes, but they are caused by the medications he gives her. When asked what medications, she said heavy sedatives that are not necessary for the type of trauma she had. Medications that are meant to confuse the mind on purpose. Theodore clenched his fists, asking where this nurse was now. She said she was here in Northwood. She quit the clinic last week, afraid of being caught investigating the records. He asked if she would be willing to give a statement. She would, but she needs protection. Dr. Travers has powerful connections if he finds out she talked. Theodore said he would hire security for her and asked Carmen where he could find her. She said she was staying at Mrs. Aurora's boarding house near the bus station, but there was something else he needed to know. The twins. Roberta told her that Dr. Travers has other plans for them besides adoption. When asked what plans, she said the Caldwell family doesn't just want to adopt the girls. They want to declare Stella mentally incapacitated forever and take control of any inheritance or assets she might have. The necklace. Theodore realized that somehow Dr. Travers had found out about Stella's grandmother's necklace. He asked Carmen how they could know about any inheritance. She didn't know, but Roberta said she heard Dr. Travers talking on the phone about valuable objects the children possessed. Theodore stood up abruptly, saying he had to go and thanking Carmen for the information, promising to make it worthwhile. Carmen warned him to be careful, that these people were dangerous. An hour later, Theodore was at Mrs. Aurora's boarding house talking to Roberta Silva, a woman in her early 40s with sincere but frightened eyes. She swore she wasn't making anything up, showing him papers she had secretly photographed. She pointed to prescriptions for medications that didn't make sense for the diagnosis, medical reports that contradicted the nurse's observations, patients who improved but never got discharged. Theodore examined the documents. Even not being a doctor, he could see the discrepancies she pointed out. He asked Roberta if she could prove that Dr. Travers was deliberately keeping patients institutionalized without medical need. She said she could, and she could prove he falsifies reports to justify prolonged hospitalizations. He asked if that was enough for an official investigation. She said it should be, but that Dr. Travers has friends on the state medical board, and previous complaints had been silenced. He asked, what if they took it directly to the press? Roberta hesitated, saying it would be dangerous for her, he could ruin her career. Theodore guaranteed her protection and financial security, asking if she could testify about Stella's real condition. She said she could, that Stella doesn't have any serious mental problems, just episodes of confusion caused by the medication. But when she's not sedated, she's a perfectly lucid and capable woman. Theodore felt a hope grow in his chest for the first time in days. He said if they could prove this. Roberta completed his thought. Her daughters could be near their real mother again. She said she had worked in psychiatry for 15 years, and what this man does is a monstrosity. That night, Theodore contacted the journalist who had covered his press conference. They scheduled a secret meeting for the next day, where Roberta would tell everything she knew about the illegal practices at the Hopewell Clinic. But the next morning, when Theodore arrived at the boarding house, he found Mrs. Aurora in a panic. She exclaimed that Roberta had disappeared. When asked how, she said she went out last night to buy cigarettes and never came back, leaving all her things in the room, even her purse. Theodore felt despair return. He asked Mrs. Aurora if anyone strange had appeared, asking for her. She confirmed that a very polite man in a suit had come, saying he was a doctor and needed to talk to her about a job. When asked who the man was, she described a tall man with graying hair and glasses who seemed important, Dr. Travers. He had found out about Roberta and acted first. Theodore rushed to the police station, but the detective was clear. Without evidence of a crime, there was nothing they could do. Roberta was an adult. She could have simply decided to leave town. Desperate, Theodore called the journalist and scheduled the meeting anyway, even without Roberta. At least he could report the suspicions and perhaps pressure for an investigation. The interview aired on the local news that night. Theodore publicly accused Dr. Travers of keeping patients institutionalized unnecessarily and of manipulating the adoption system for his own benefit. The reaction was immediate. Dr. Travers called an hour after the program. He asked if Theodore really never learns. Theodore asked where Roberta was. The doctor feigned ignorance, then said, he must be talking about the nurse who was spreading false information about his clinic. She decided to accept a job in another state, much better for her career. Theodore accused him of threatening her. The doctor claimed he offered better opportunities, that it was different. He told Philip to stop, to let Stella out of the clinic, to let the twins come home. The doctor said Theodore had his chance. He offered a reasonable deal, but he chose the path of war. And now he would find out what it means to face someone with real resources. Theodore said he was willing to fight. The doctor asked if he really was, because he had just received interesting information about his company. It seems there are tax irregularities that warrant investigation, and it would be a shame if the IRS decided to do a full audit. Theodore's stomach sank. Julian handled the company's taxes, and if there were irregularities, he didn't know. The doctor continued, saying he also discovered that his visits to the orphanage violated several child protection regulations, and there were witnesses confirming inappropriate behavior with minors. Theodore called it a lie. The doctor said it was their word against his, and guessed who had more credibility. Theodore asked what he wanted. He wanted him to give up, publicly, to admit he was not fit to care for the twins, and to agree to their adoption by the Caldwell family. Theodore said, never. The doctor warned him to prepare, brother, because what comes next will destroy not only his chances with the girls, but his entire life. The call ended, leaving Theodore alone with the certainty that he was facing an adversary who would not hesitate to destroy him completely. But that same night, something unexpected happened. Beatrice called with news that would change everything once again. She said Theodore needed to come to the orphanage now. They had a very important visitor. When asked who, she said it was the twins' mother that Stella had managed to get out of the clinic. Theodore arrived at the orphanage in record time, his heart pounding erratically. He found Beatrice in the main room with a woman he took a few seconds to recognize. Stella was unrecognizable, too thin, pale, with deep dark circles, but her eyes shone with a lucidity he hadn't seen at the clinic. She said his name, rising with difficulty. She said Beatrice had told her everything about him discovering the girls, about him fighting for them. Theodore asked how she managed to get out. She simply replied that she escaped, that Roberta had helped her before she disappeared. She said Roberta told her he was trying to get her out, that Dr. Travers was keeping her institutionalized out of revenge. He asked if she knew where Roberta was. She didn't know. Roberta woke her up in the middle of the night, gave her clothes and some money, and told her to come straight here, saying she had discovered the truth about the medications they were giving her. Beatrice intervened, saying Stella had told her disturbing things about what happened at the clinic, patients being unnecessarily medicated, families paying to keep relatives institutionalized. Stella confirmed it was true, her voice gaining strength. There was a woman there, Mrs. Mercedes, institutionalized for 3 years because her children wanted her inheritance. She was perfectly lucid, but Dr. Travers kept her doped up on drugs that made her seem confused. Theodore asked Stella if she was able to care for the twins now. She said she was. Her head was clear for the first time in 2 years. All those symptoms she had were caused by the medication. She paused, tears in her eyes, and accused Theodore that she lost 2 years of her daughter's lives because of his personal vendetta with his brother. She said he told her everything, how they grew up in the same orphanage, how he rejected him, how he had been planning this revenge for years, and she and the girls were just instruments of his anger against him. Theodore felt the weight of guilt crush his chest. He said he was so sorry, if only he had known. She retorted that he would have known if he hadn't run away when he found out she was pregnant. The accusation hurt, but Theodore knew she was right. He said she was right. He was a coward, but now he wanted to do the right thing. She said the right thing was to get their daughters back. He explained they were with the Caldwell family. It was an emergency transfer based on false complaints against the orphanage. She said then they would go get them. He explained it wasn't that simple. They have resources, lawyers, influence, and technically she was still a fugitive from a psychiatric hospitalization. She argued that she was lucid, any competent doctor could attest to that. He said the problem was that Dr. Travers had medical credibility and could claim she was having a manic episode, that the escape was proof of her instability. Beatrice spoke up, saying there was a solution. She knew a psychiatrist in Chicago, Dr. Henry Moore, who specializes in cases of wrongful institutionalization, and if he evaluated Stella and confirmed her sanity. Theodore asked if he would do it. Beatrice said he would, and he had enough credibility to challenge any diagnosis from Dr. Travers. Theodore said then they would go to Chicago right now. Stella told him to wait, that before anything else, she needed to know where the girls' belongings were, especially their doll. Theodore and Beatrice exchanged glances. She asked why. Stella said because the necklace from her grandmother was hidden in that doll. It was the only real inheritance she could leave for the girls, and if the Caldwell family found out about it. Theodore said heavily that they already knew. Somehow Dr. Travers had found out. She asked how. He didn't know, but they mentioned the girls possessed valuable objects. Stella paled. She realized that was why they wanted to adopt them so badly. It wasn't just about having daughters, it was about the money. He asked how much the necklace was worth. She said about $50,000. Her grandmother was from a wealthy family that lost everything in the 1929 crash, but managed to hide some jewels. When she passed, she left the necklace to her on the condition that she only sell it in extreme need or leave it for her daughters. He asked if she ever sold it, even in hardship. She said never. It was the only connection the girls would have to their family's history. But if those people found out, Beatrice intervened, saying they needed to act fast. If the Caldwell family had the necklace, they could use it to strengthen their adoption case, claiming they could better care for the girls' needs. Stella added bitterly that, or they could just take the necklace and then return the girls when they no longer need them. Theodore stood up, determined. He said they would go to Chicago now, first get the psychiatric evaluation for Stella, then go get the girls. But as they were leaving the orphanage, they were intercepted by 2 cars. From the first, 2 plainclothes police officers got out. From the second, Dr. Travers and a man Theodore recognized as Robert Caldwell. One of the officers addressed Stella Morris, saying she was being taken back to the Hopewell Clinic by court order, as she was considered a fugitive from compulsory institutionalization. Theodore protested it was illegal, that she was lucid and had the right to a second medical opinion. Dr. Travers said with a cruel smile that the escape itself was proof of the patient's mental instability, that people in their right mind don't flee medical treatment. Stella argued she fled because she was being unnecessarily medicated. The doctor dismissed it as delusions of the patient herself, very common in cases of neurological trauma like hers. Stella clung to Theodore's arm, pleading not to let them take her, that she was lucid and could care for her daughters. Robert Caldwell told Mr. Vance he was very sorry for this situation, but he needed to understand that the girls need stability, and his family could offer that. Dr. Travers added that his daughters were very well cared for, in a luxurious house, with everything they need, receiving love and full attention. Stella screamed that they were not his daughters, they were hers, and she wanted them back. Dr. Travers pointed to the officers and said, "See, aggressive and irrational behavior, clearly not in a condition to care for children." Theodore stood between Stella and the officers, demanding she have the right to an independent evaluation before being taken back. An officer said they had a court order and she had to come with them. Beatrice came out of the orphanage with a folder saying she had documents that might interest them. When asked what documents, she said photographs of medical records from the Hopewell Clinic, showing discrepancies between diagnoses and nurses' observations, evidence that patients were being kept institutionalized without medical need. Dr. Travers paled, claiming the documents were fake and had no legal value if obtained illegally. Beatrice retorted they were obtained by a nurse concerned for the patient's well-being and were authentic. One of the officers asked where this nurse was. Theodore looked directly at Dr. Travers and asked where Roberta Silva was, doctor. The doctor claimed not to know who they were talking about. Theodore specified the nurse who worked at his clinic until last week, the same one who mysteriously disappeared after collecting evidence against his practices. The doctor said they were delusional, but there was nervousness in his voice. The older officer studied the documents Beatrice had handed him, saying the allegations were serious and perhaps they should investigate before executing the transfer. Robert Caldwell intervened, stating they had a clear court order and that medical practice issues could be investigated separately. The officer agreed, telling Mrs. Stella she had to come with them. Stella looked at Theodore with desperation, pleading not to let them do this, not to separate her from the girls again. He promised he would get her out and bring their daughters back. Dr. Travers mocked him, asking how he would promise that he was just a failed businessman losing everything, his company, his credibility, his chances with the children, and soon he wouldn't even have the resources to hire a decent lawyer. Theodore looked into his brother's eyes and saw all the malice that years of resentment had created. He told Philip he had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The doctor said there was no war, only consequences, and he would find out that some actions have consequences that last a lifetime. As they took Stella away, she shouted one last thing that made Theodore's blood run cold. "Theodore! The girls have a birthmark, both of them, on their right shoulder. It's the proof that they are our daughters." The car departed, leaving Theodore and Beatrice alone in the orphanage courtyard, watching their last hope disappear over the horizon. 6 weeks had passed since Stella was taken back to the clinic, and Theodore was at the end of his rope. He had lost almost everything. Julian had dissolved the partnership and taken control of the factory. The IRS had frozen his accounts on suspicion of tax evasion, and his financial resources were rapidly depleting. But that Tuesday morning, a call changed everything. It was from an unknown number, a nervous female voice. She identified herself as Roberta Silva. Theodore almost dropped the phone. He exclaimed her name, saying they had been looking for her for weeks. She said she was hiding in Minas Gerais at a cousin's house, and that she had something that could destroy Dr. Travers for good. When asked what, she said recordings. She managed to record his conversations with the Caldwell family. With other doctors, with clinic staff, she had evidence of everything. The unnecessary medications, the financial agreements, the fraudulent institutionalizations. Theodore's heart raced. He said, "Roberta, this could save Stella and bring the girls back." She said it could, but there was a problem. She needed protection before handing over the recordings, as Dr. Travers had found out she helped Stella escape and was looking for her. They arranged to meet in Poços de Caldas the next day. The following morning, Theodore made the most important trip of his life. A mix of hope and fear dominated his thoughts. He found Roberta at the square as arranged. She was visibly shaken but determined. She handed him a flash drive, saying she brought everything, over 20 hours of recordings of phone calls, meetings, everything. When asked how, she said she'd installed a recorder in his office and for 3 months recorded everything, including the conversation where he admits to keeping Stella institutionalized for personal revenge. Theodore inserted the flash drive into the laptop he had brought. The recordings were devastating. Dr. Travers talking to Robert Caldwell about splitting the value of the twins' necklace, discussions on how to keep Stella drugged, to appear unstable, agreements with other doctors to validate false diagnoses. But the most shocking recording was a conversation between Dr. Travers and a female voice Theodore recognized as Sandra Caldwell. She asked if the girls were adapting well. She said they were, but they ask for their mother and that Theodore guy every day. The doctor said they would soon forget that children at that age are malleable, and in a few months they wouldn't even remember their previous life. She asked about the necklace, if they had found it. He said not yet. The girls insisted they didn't know where it was, but they would find it. She said, "Doctor, if they don't find that necklace, the deal isn't worth it for them. $50,000 justifies a lot of their efforts." He replied they would find it, using more persuasive methods if necessary. Theodore felt sick listening to it. They were willing to psychologically torture 4-year-old children for money. He asked Roberta if these recordings were enough to arrest him. She said they were, but they needed to deliver them correctly. If they simply took them to the local police, he could use his influence to quash the case. She suggested the press first, then the district attorney, to create public pressure before he could react. That same afternoon, Theodore was back in Northwood with the recordings. He contacted the journalist who had previously covered his story and gave him all the material. The journalist said it was pure dynamite after listening to some recordings, but warned Theodore that when it aired, it would become a national scandal, and asked if he was prepared. Theodore said he was prepared for anything that would bring his daughters back. The report aired on a special edition of the local news that very night, but was quickly picked up by state and national media outlets. The recordings were played in full, exposing the entire network of corruption and abuse that Dr. Travers had created. The reaction was immediate and devastating for those involved. The next morning, a joint operation by the state police and the district attorney's office raided the Hopewell Clinic. Dr. Travers was arrested on the spot, caught trying to destroy incriminating medical records. Robert and Sandra Caldwell were taken in for questioning, accused of participating in an illegal adoption scheme and attempted embezzlement. But for Theodore, the most important moment happened when he was finally able to enter the clinic with the investigators. He found Stella in the same room where he had visited her months before, but this time she was lucid and desperate. She cried out his name when she saw him, saying they told her he had given up, that he had abandoned them again. He said never, hugging her, that he would never give up on them. She asked about the girls. He said they were going to get them now. The Caldwell family's house in a wealthy Chicago suburb was the next destination of the operation. When the authorities arrived, they found Amelia and Olivia playing sadly in the backyard, visibly downcast and homesick. They screamed Daddy Theo upon seeing him, running into his arms with a heartbreaking joy. He asked if they were okay, if anyone had hurt them. Amelia said, crying, that they just wanted to go home and see their mommy. He asked about Violet, where their doll was. Isadora said the man took her and opened her belly, took something out from inside and said it was his now. Theodore felt anger, but forced himself to stay calm, reassuring them they would get back everything that was theirs. The necklace was found in Robert Caldwell's private safe, along with documents planning the sale of the piece after the adoption was finalized, more evidence that the interest in the twins had never been parental. 3 months later, life had reorganized in a way Theodore could never have imagined. Stella had fully recovered and was living with the twins in a simple but cozy house Theodore had bought for them in Northwood. He himself had restarted his professional life with a small shoe repair shop, a way to return to his roots and reconnect with the manual labor he had abandoned for decades in pursuit of corporate success. One sunny afternoon, as they played in the yard, Amelia asked why he took so long to come back for them. He replied, hugging them both, that sometimes adults make silly choices, but the important thing is that they were together now. Olivia asked if it was forever. He said forever. Stella approached, bringing lemonade for everyone. In recent months, she and Theodore had slowly rebuilt their relationship, now based on maturity and honesty, instead of youthful passion and fear. She said, sitting next to him, that the girls wanted to know if they were getting married. He asked what she had answered. She said that marriage is about love and commitment, not about papers or social convenience. He asked if she thought they had that. She said she thought they were learning to have it. Theodore looked at the small family he had almost lost through his own cowardice and the malice of others. Amelia and Olivia were playing with the doll Violet, which had been stitched back up and now held not a valuable necklace, but drawings they had made of their reunited family. He told Stella he was sorry for everything they had lost, for the years the girls grew up without a father, for the suffering she went through, for almost losing everything because of his inability to take responsibility. Stella interrupted him gently, saying the past served to teach them what matters is what they do with the lessons learned. At that moment, the twins approached. Amelia said, with the comical seriousness of small children, asking if they had stopped being afraid of liking each other. Theodore and Stella looked at each other and laughed. The first time in years they had laughed together, truly happy. Stella replied, "Yes, my flower, we stopped being afraid." Isadora asked if they were a real family now. Theodore said, embracing the three women in his life, that they always were. They just needed to find that out. As the sun set over northward, painting the sky in golden hues, the family that had been separated by pain, manipulation, and fear was finally complete. Dr. Travers had been sentenced to 8 years in prison for multiple crimes. The Caldwell family faced charges for attempted fraudulent adoption. Roberta had received protection and a new identity, now working as a consultant in medical abuse cases, and in a simple house with a flowery yard and the laughter of children. Theodore Vance discovered that true wealth was not in the million-dollar contracts or the corporate success he had lost, but in the small hands that clung to his, in the eyes that looked at him with unconditional love, and in the woman who had chosen to forgive him and rebuild a life together. For the first time since his childhood in the orphanage, Theodore truly felt at home. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you stories every day that will make your life happier. Let me know what you thought of my story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.